You're listening to Storystruck. I'm Rachel, a writer and editor.
And I'm Nino, an intuitive book coach and writer. Welcome to our curious community where we dive into everything books and writing. Let's get into the story. Welcome everyone to season 3. I'm so excited that we are officially in the 3rd season. I feel like we're getting our strides here. We're starting to gallop a little bit. I don't know why that's a horse reference, but it is. So today's episode is going to be on genre mashing, and it is a request from a listener. So shout out to Lori. Thank you for sending us that email and requesting something on genre mashing. She is working on her own kind of mash of genre, and it is in the final throes of editing, I think she said. So excited for you. Cannot wait to read it. And so without further ado, let's start the chatting. Rachel, you take it away.
Yeah. So something that we were talking about is, when do books actually cross that threshold of becoming like a genre mash or a genre blend? And at what point do we start calling it that? Do we start calling it that once it crosses this invisible line in the writing and the reader experience? Or is it when like the popularity of something happens and we start getting more and more, and maybe we just notice it more, but we've always had it there? And like the one that we talked about for this was Romantasy, right? Because we have tons of fantasy out there, and a lot of times fantasy does have romance in it.
Because love is universal. Love is a universal experience, so it can be present in everything. That doesn't make a horror with like love in it as a romance, but because it became more prevalent and women started writing it, all of a sudden it is separated, because if you look at a lot of fantasy books that are written by men, there are romance elements in it. There's sex, there's love, So,
Yeah.
But then women start writing it and it's just like, oh yeah, this is Romantasy now. And now Romantasy is really, really big. And there are books that are categorized as Romantasy that have almost like such a minute amount of romance in it just because now it's a buzzword.
Exactly. So like, is it an accurate description of the book, or has it just become a marketing tactic to say, well, my audience is primarily female, so I'm going to call this Romantasy, even though maybe it's not really Romantasy, or because I'm a female author, my publisher says this is going to be Romantasy because it's written by a woman. And something really neat I just thought of, because we had talked about Lord of the Rings, about that there is some romance in there, subtle, but I'm reading and slogging through the Wheel of Time series, and I just thought about this because last night I hit a scene and I was like, whoa. So the main character in that, he actually has 3 women, and all of them want to marry him. And they're like in the culture, they have like the sister wives kind of thing going. And I was like,
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
How much love and sex and marriage is in Game of Thrones?
Yep.
But you would never call that Romantasy. Why? Because it's written by a man, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And like, I understand, like, if you have a romance trope, if it's an enemies to lovers romance trope, you're following a lot of the beats for a romance, and it's happening in a fantasy world, I can totally see how that is a cut and dry Romantasy mashup, right? Because you're taking this genre and you're putting them together. But now, fantasy is like, oh, if there's any sex in it whatsoever and it's written by a woman, then it's Romantasy. But we never categorize something like Game of Thrones as a Romantasy.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like we talked about this, I think a little bit on our spice episode. So if you're like interested in spice and Romantasy and all of that stuff, that was such a fun episode and is one of our most popular. So you got to go check it out. I just love that episode.
It was one of like 1920 or episode 19 or 20 or something like that from season 2. It's just a couple back.
Yeah. And we'll post it in the show notes. But something that came up in that, which was interesting, is we were looking at for romantasy, like where do we draw the line? And I think that's great for this genre blending genre mashup conversation because we have some books where in the romantasy, if you take the romance out and the engine falls apart, then it's a romance forward and the fantasy is kind of in the background. So that is kind of the essence of romantasy. And then there's like these other ways, and I'm almost wondering, are they like marketing ploys now when we're looking at it? Is it a romantic fantasy or a fantasy romance? And those have almost become entry points to romantasy or subgenres of romantasy. And it's just fascinating because you could have a fantasy romance, which is a romance story with fantasy vibes, maybe kind of equal. Romantasy, the romance takes the center stage. And a romantic fantasy is primarily fantasy with heavy romance elements, but the romance doesn't need to exist for the book to go on. So it's like you go down a rabbit hole of what even are these names of these genres. And Newt
Yeah.
Man is joined us again if you heard his monstrous meow from the floor.
Yeah, and I think as a predominantly a fantasy reader, like it does get frustrating when everything's marketed as romantasy now. It makes it difficult to actually understand because I didn't read Spark of the Everflame for a long time because it was marketed as a romantasy. And then I actually read it and I'm like, I would not have labeled this as a romantasy. She's a girl living her life. It's a fantasy. Like, does it get into romantasy? Yeah, I would say the third book could be definitely categorized as romantasy, among other things that I'm not going to talk about at this moment. But I have opinions. But I think that, as somebody who enjoys fantasy, like I don't want to just like I prefer female authors because I feel like they tend to write women better and they tend to include more diversity as well in their books, than men typically do. And so I prefer reading women, but then it's all heavily marketed as romantasy. And sometimes it's just like, oh, we didn't need that much spice in this story. And then sometimes it's, almost none at all. And I'm like, well, I thought I was going to, and which is why they have like the whole chili pepper scale and all of that stuff. But it's still, it's a lot. But that is more of what we were talking about in the spice episode. I looked up some genre mashups to like just get some good, because I can think of some, where like in my course, Fantastical Foundations, where I take people through building the foundations for their book. I talk about this in like if you're combining story structures. So say you're combining a mystery structure in a fantasy world, the Tainted Cup is a good example of that. And really, really good series, by the way. The main character is super dyslexic, and you just don't find dyslexic characters very often. So I was super pumped about that. So, that's a great example because you have the mystery elements, you have the mystery beats that we kind of go through, but it's happening in this crazy fantasy world. And you kind of even have like some familiar dynamics between him and his person that he's working with. It's a very Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson kind of dynamic. And so you have like this little essence of this mystery going on, but it's happening in this world of magic and potions and super powered abilities and like stuff like that. And it's so cool. And so like whenever you do a mashup, if you are very intentional about how you do it, it can be these really, really amazing books and then turn into a thing. Like romantasy is a thing because, we took things like a romance trope and romance beats and we put them into a fantasy world and we created romantasy, as it's done proper. And so, like it can be really, really cool, but I think you have to be intentional about which one's more of the setting and which one's more of the structure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I like to kind of look at, because I'm, as an editor, always like, where does your book belong on the shelf? And so I think that when we do the genre mashups, it can be really fun. It can be really freeing, very exciting. You can get some cool stuff. But on the other side of the spectrum, you also have to be intentional, because if you just are like, I love all of these things and I'm putting all of these things together and I'm just going to have like this amazing, like sparkly thing I'm just going to throw all over the place, your book might not hit the way you want it to hit, because you're going to have those reader expectations from the genres that you're putting in. So that is, I think, my one thing to be very careful of, is to make sure you're still meeting your genre expectations for like your main genre. And then if you have like a subgenre, so let's use Romantasy as an example. So you have romance and you have fantasy. So romance readers are going to expect a happily ever after, and the fantasy people are going to expect to be immersed into, this world building, characters, all of these things. So if you have this romantasy you're putting out and you're one of the main love interests, protagonist dies before the end of the book and it's like this tragedy, your romantasy readers are going to tear you apart if you're marketing it as a romantasy. They'll be like, I hate you. I'm never reading any of your books. Like, oh my God, just don't
How
do
could
that.
you kill
How
Marcus?
could you do that? So yeah, you want to be careful with that. And I think that that's where you can do some market research and go take a look at some other genre mashups that are similar to what you're doing, and look at those reviews that are like those, 4 or 5 star reviews, and then maybe like those 2, 3 star reviews. And then you can kind of see people are like, I thought that the romance was going to play a bigger role in this based on this, or, the romance was really good, but then we just totally skipped over the world, and the world was like so generic and boring. And that way you can see, where does my book hit? And maybe I'm writing more of a fantasy with a romantic subplot and not exactly a romantasy. And you'll be able to use that in your plotting, but also in your marketing. So I think that
Yeah.
is really good
I
to
think that's so
about.
important to look at that, like, because you also, as a writer, you have to honor the story.
Yeah.
And so if the story wants to kill Marcus, we have to kill Marcus, unfortunately. But sorry, Marcus, but you've got to die.
You gotta go. Bye.
So therefore, that book might be better off in a fantasy category. And if there's little bits of it, like, yeah, there is sex in it. Yes, there is romance and stuff, but here's where we live now. Like this is a fantasy book. So you're not making those promises, and you firmly have to put it there, and yeah. And then if you have something that is a very cut and dry romance trope that just happens to include fairies, then maybe you put it in that romance category predominantly. But what do you think? Because I know that this is kind of questions that I've gotten before, where it's just like, okay, well, it's historical fiction, but then there's also a mystery, but then there's also a romance. Because I know what I would say to that. Like, it's like, okay, so which one is the setting? Which one is the story, and which one is the subplot? And so the story is your category.
Yeah.
More than anything. And so, because like we're here, we're in it for stories. When we go to the bookstore, we're looking for stories. I go to the fantasy section because those are the types of stories that I like. I like those kind of worlds and stuff like that. And so, like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I like that example with like you have the fantasy, you have the historical, and you have the romance. And I have a really interesting example that I'll show you here. It's got an additional little one tossed into it as well. So I like to look at, right, number one, where's the book going to live on the shelf? So in your story, is it primarily the fantasy? Is it primarily a historical? Because people who read historicals are going to have a totally different take, because if you're marketing this primarily as a historical and they get in there and there's dragons and things, they're like, whoa. Back in King Arthur's day, there were not dragons. Like, they're going to get pissed. Where your fantasy readers were of historical fantasy, they're going to be like, hell yeah, bring on the dragons. So you want to look at where it is on the shelf, and then you look at your secondary one. So for that one, it's probably going to be your fantasy forward as where it's living. And then your secondary genre is the historical. And so the historical is making promises to your reader, right? Like if you're having a historical fantasy, then you better have whatever historical customs and clothes and weapons and things that match that. They
Yeah,
don't
you
want
have
to
to
all
do
of a
that
sudden have
research
something
to
weird
make
thrown in.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
to make sure that they're like on par with that. A historical fantasy actually that I'm super excited about is La Costa by Emily Dexter.
Yes.
I can't freaking wait for it because it's also gay. And so we have Italian historical fantasy with lesbians and magic, and I not freaking wait.
Yes,
Sorry, I
that
just
is
thought of
on
that and
the
I just got like,
pre-order.
it was pre-ordered the second it was available.
Yeah, you're like, oh yes, I'm in.
Yeah.
So yeah, and right, and if you're fantasy forward in your book, then you don't have to worry about being historically accurate. Where if you're writing a historical piece, those people are going to really expect it to be more historically accurate, even if it's a work of fiction. And then there's two other things I look at, like what is moving the plot forward? What is your story engine? And that can be along the lines of your fantasy, it can be along the lines of your horror, or that's where you can sprinkle a little something else in and have an inspiration from another genre. And then the last part is your tone. So is your tone primarily one or the other, or are you stealing a tone from something else? So something stealing tone, and then I'll show you the book, is we're seeing a lot of TV shows that are like horror comedy. So if we think
Yeah.
of like Santa Clarita Diet, it is kind of like this dark fantasy, dark paranormal thing, but it's also comedy. But it's not a satire of itself. Like the comedy is sprinkled in there, but like people die and it's like kind of gross. And like, but she has to go to work even though she wants to like, eat some brains. And where am I going to sneak off to eat my brains while I'm showing these houses? And which house would be really good to have a murder scene in and clean it up? So like you have that horror comedy element where then you have like dark things we do in the shadows where it's very much a satire, right? So that is really heavy on the comedy, really light and cheeky on the horror. So you can like kind of have these fun little combinations of things. You just have to know what you're going after. Because if you have a horror comedy, is it horror first or is it comedy first? Because if
It's like
it's,
when they say like, when it's like, oh, what if we did a Regency romance but make it scary?
yes.
So your primary is that Regency romance,
Yes.
but the make it scary is that additional element to it,
Yes. And that's the book that I have right here.
Yeah.
So this book is hilarious. And you have another book as well that also goes along these lines. And I think it's hilarious because they're almost the same time period, it just cracks me up. So the one I have is called Secrets and Sacrifices. It is a Regency Cthulhu novel, and it's actually through the canon of Call of Cthulhu, which is a role-playing game, like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of game. And the Eldritch horror is very like sci-fi-ish kind of horror in there. It's not just like traditional monsters. So this book takes place in Regency era, and it actually has a female protagonist, which is cool. And she is trying to uncover this mystery and discover the truth of like what happened to like her husband to be, who just like disappeared off the face of the earth. And something sinister happened that may have to do with this cult that's in like the basement of his family member's home because they're summoning up some nasty shit. So that's like, this book is like the weirdest combination. And I'm so stoked to read it because I love Call of Cthulhu and I like historical romance. And I'm like, could you get a better blend of this? But I know going in, it's going to have historical accuracy from the Regency romance because it is marketed as a Regency romance and those people expect historical accuracy. But I'm not expecting complete historical accuracy because we're dealing with the Call of Cthulhu world. But Call of Cthulhu, oddly enough, they do tons of research in their stuff to have in like very historically accurate stuff of like weapons and how many bullets does this have and how big is it and how can you hide it and all of these things because it is, like that Dungeons and Dragons role-playing style game. And, it has very specific mechanics based in reality, topped with the fantastical.
That's so crazy. Yeah. The example that I first came up with was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Yeah.
Which is just, I haven't read it because I saw that on the shelf when it first came out and I said, what the fuck? What is this? No, because I love the movie with Keira Knightley.
Mm-hmm.
I love that movie. I've never read the book because Jane Austen is intimidating for my little dyslexic brain. But that was one of the examples that I had and stuff. And then, there's other ones, sci-fi mystery, historical fiction and fantasy, which we talked about already. Fantasy plus heist is another one that came on.
Yes.
The example is Six Crows, or how I've not read this book because it's Leigh Bardugo and I freaking love her. She's sitting right here and right here. Like this shelf here is my favorites of shelves.
I feel like you like Vanna White.
And so yeah. I'm like, this is my favorites of shelves. And so like this is Leigh Bardugo, this is Leigh Bardugo. Like I love her and I have not read that book, but I've been seeing it all over the place. So I don't know, maybe it's kind of new. But The Six of Crows is that fantasy heist. And then there's this one, Dread Nation, that is historical fiction and horror / dystopian. And it's just like there's so many things that you can do, but it's, part of it has to be the setting, the world, whereas like the mystery element is more of how the story plays out. Like you're going to have those mystery beats. The story is revolving around a mystery. And so then it's more of a mystery than it is a historical fiction so it's a historical fiction mystery, I guess. And then the thing I do want to state about romance and stuff is, first off, in romance, sometimes it's not always love. Sometimes it's just sex. And, both love and sex live because they're very human things. So they can live anywhere. It doesn't mean it's specifically a romance. Like The Witcher is not a romance. Yeah. But sure enough, in chapter 3, he's like sleeping with someone. Like, but it's not a romance. But sex is natural. Love is natural. So seeing those things in a world doesn't mean it has to be categorized as a romance. And I think sometimes as female authors, we think that we have to, because there is romance in there, that we have to categorize it as a romance somewhere. And like you said, if the romance doesn't actually have a major piece of the plot, like if the plot isn't banking on the romance, then you don't have to categorize it. Because like love is universal. If George R.R. Martin doesn't have to call his thing romantasy, then you don't either. If you don't want to, unless it is literally like everything. Like unless that romance is literally everything to the plot,
So yeah, I think we see that too. I will use a movie example. So if we look at Fast and Furious franchise, right? It is action. It is some suspense. There is love. There is like, we have in the first one, right? We have that relationship between the undercover cop and Dom's sister. And that's like a driving factor in it. But that's not like classified as a romance or an action romance. It's an action movie, kind of not quite a thriller, but it's an action movie with romance and with sex in it. Right?
Yep.
That's what it is. We don't have to call it anything other than it is. But then you have stuff that, like, in romance, there's romantic suspense. And in that, if you take the romance out of a romantic suspense novel, then the book doesn't work. So that is specifically going to be a romantic suspense, but that is done intentionally by the author. But just because it has action and romance It doesn't have to be a romance or a romantic thriller. It can be, Fast and Furious. It can just be what it wants to
Yeah.
be.
And I think sometimes, when we go in, especially us pantsers, I know you plotters. Here, by the way, if you're new to the podcast, we are the most stereotypical versions of a plotter or pantser. Usually people live in the in-between. Rachel and I are the most stereotypical cookie cutter pantser and plotter ever. In fact, we try and help each other with it. Like we try, like I know I was like, okay, for this next book, I really do need to do more planning. Can you
Yes, we
help?
have like
Like,
plot
how would you
therapy,
do
like
that?
group therapy,
Yeah.
Plotter Planner
Yeah.
Anonymous.
And she's like, my chapter's outlined by like 23 pages. How do I like get into the flow of this? you know? The thing is, like, when you're going into a book, you're about to start writing the book. When you go into it, having this general idea, even if you're not like writing it down and planning everything out and making it all perfect, having this general idea of your world. What kind of world is it? What are the rules, the expectations? What are the systems and structures like? Having that going into it and then moving into like, how are you going to structure this book? What type of, where are your beats going to live? What kind of major plot devices are you going to use, or story structures might you use? Because the heroine's journey works for any type of book. It's just really good in a fantasy book, and you can use those with, in all these different ways. But if you just go into it with just some of this in mind, it's going to save you a lot of time later on where you're in editing or you're about to start marketing your book and you're like, where does it live? So do yourself a favor and get those fantastical foundations sorted ahead of time so that you're not going in editing later on saying shit,
Yeah.
Because
So,
that's what I did with my book. Oh my
yeah.
God. Like you remember my existential crisis that I had? I'm like, wait,
Yes.
did I just write a romantasy? Oh my
You were
God. Did I?
freaking out. I like had to talk you off like the ledge of like throwing your book out the window. You're like, hell to the no. I didn't want this. And I'm like, breathe.
Because I was not even a reader of romantasy at that time. Like I've started to pick up some romantasy over time just because I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I apparently wrote one. So, because you were reading that book. I have it around here somewhere. How to Write a Romantasy?
How to Write Romantasy. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were reading that book and you were like telling me like these little tidbits that you had. Yeah. And you were
Yeah.
telling me all these like little tidbits, and then I'm like, wait. What do you mean? I wrote a romantasy because the love is vital.
It is. Absolutely is
Between Loki
vital.
and Sigyn, the love is vital. Without Sigyn, nothing would have happened. She is pivotal. She is the most important thing that ever happened to Loki. And so I'm like, oh dang. Not to mention, there is also sex scenes in it and stuff, which I was not super happy with. I was not like super into, but Loki and the book were just like, no, this is what we need. This is what we're going to do. So you're going to have to just shut up and write. And I'm like, yeah,
Oh my God.
that was an adventure. But then I'm looking back on it and I'm like, oh my God. And I have all this structural stuff and like it's taking me forever to edit because it's also part of a series, which I didn't also plan. I told you I am the ultimate pantser. And so now I'm spending 8 million times as much time in editing as I would normally. My other book, I planned a little bit, like on a single sheet of paper, at least. And I'm zipping through because I wrote a cozy fantasy. I'm zipping through the editing for that, no problem, making small tweaks and changes. And I'm going to have that thing done in no time because I just spent 2 seconds to just be like, oh, what's this world like? What are the major points that she's got to hit? And, where is it? What kind of category is it and stuff? And so it's just a cozy fantasy that has a little tiny little romance element to it, but yeah, it makes a difference is what I'm trying to say.
It does. And by the way, the How to Write a Romantasy, it's blending fantasy and romance into one heart-stopping adventure by Jenna Moreci. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is hands down my favorite. Like, this has got to be like my top probably 3 craft books I've ever read because she just has the funnest personality. In this book, it does not feel like you're reading a stuffy craft book, an MFA book. Like, oh my God, this is like, oh, maybe I'll read how many pages are left in this chapter. I'm like, oh my God, there's only this many pages left in the book, right? And she has another book, and I got it in the mail this week, and I can't wait to read it. It's Shut Up and Write the Book.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That sounds like your book.
This is what I need, a step-by-step
This
book
is
to
what you need
crafting
in
your
life.
novel. Just shut up and write it, Rachel, and stop, like, dying on the hill of research. Ooh, and I just, like, went through a page, and it was, like, LGBTQ+. So, yeah, I'm super stoked to read her other book, so I will definitely report back on how that one is.
Yeah. And we're probably gonna end up doing stuff on that one because that's my next craft book to read.
Mhm.
Is that one because I'm going back into editing and writing in my Norse series once my Guardian of the Gate is wrapped up and sent out to agents. So yeah. The other one is 7 Drafts. I've been reading that one.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So good, especially if you're like, just give me what I need to know. Just literally tell me how to sort this out and there. And also make it entertaining and fun.
Yes. Yeah, that one, I think I'm reading that first, and then I'm gonna read Shut Up and Write the Book, because I do have that one, and it's been on my list. So I think that is my craft book for the month, is reading that one. And then I had a example that I wanted to share, and then I wanna go back to the cozy, realm because I think cozy is very interesting because 'cause we're seeing a lot of cozy blends.
Oh yeah, Cozy is making just such a I don't want to say comeback because I don't think it's coming back, but like it's popping off. There we are.
Yeah, it's popping off for sure. Because I like got this intuitive download for a book this weekend. And it just was like, because I have another book. So originally I was like, I'm going to write cozy fantasy. And then I was like, that's just not feeling quite right. And my character's like, yeah, I'm a little bit darker. And so I was like, okay, well, this is going to be like a 3-book epic dark fantasy with romance and like all these things. And like I've gotten like a whole bunch of world building plotting and stuff done on that. That's like my epic baby. And when I like do my practice, like if I just sit down and I'm just like, I'm just going to write something, I write things that are like weird. Like a therapist, like that's like coaching, or she's like treating a vampire, and the vampire's like, yeah, like I want this nun and I've been stalking her. And then like the other vampire in the support group's like, yeah, I started dating this human girl, but dad invited me over and like it was cool because he invited me in the house so I could go in the house. But then we sat down and he wanted me to say grace. And like I just bolted out of there. I can't even see her again. This is like the weird shit. And then like someone like talking with squirrels and having conversations. And so I'm like, okay, my brain is weird. I like to write kind of quirky things. And I got this idea and I was like, all right, what tonal things inspire me? And so I was like, okay, I feel like the stuff I go to is more modern. It's not completely immersed in a fantasy world. Like that's where my brain goes. And I want to write adult. So my primary shelf, adult urban fantasy. All right. I kind of like something that's repeatable, but not super rigid. Like cozy mystery is repeatable, but it's very rigid. Every book follows the exact same process. You got to have, your first body, your second body dropped, so many red herrings and so many clues. And it's like, oh my God, like you would think I'd love that with my brain, but it felt so constricting. I'm like, no, I don't like it. I don't want to be like stuck with one thing. And then I'm like, my tone is kind of weird and quirky. So my tone's kind of a little along the vibes of like this horror comedy tone. And my secondary thread, I'd love to have a romantic subplot. So then I'm like, okay, what does this sound like? It sounds a little bit like Buffy meets Warehouse 13 in a haven-like community. And I'm like, okay, so what does this story sound like? And then I wrote, it's about a woman who left her strange hometown and her family's supernatural responsibilities behind, only to get dragged back into them. She can read psychic impressions from objects, psychometry. And her childhood best friend turns out to be a shapeshifter, and her grandmother is basically running a supernatural damage control facility out of the back of her antique shop. So, right, she's like, Grandma, like, I don't understand what's happening. So each book, they're going to have like something they have to investigate, something that's going on, and she's going to kind of learn more about her background, her history, and all of this stuff, working with her, shifter friend who's like, the traveling veterinarian, but also the coroner, because then she can cover up if, murder was not exactly, a bear attack, Well, we'll just call it a bear attack. And then me and you are going to go out there and then we're going to come back home and grandma's going to be like, why are you drifting ectoplasm all over my rug in here? Like, girls. And then we have to call Dave, our handyman. And he's like, ma'am, I don't know what kind of repair work. Like, why do I need to fix this? Like, metal door was pulled off the hinges. I'm not sure what you ladies are doing around here, but like, something ain't right. And my rates just doubled if I got to work in this crazy loony bin some more. So, right, like, it's just this like weird, like quirky kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my God, my brain is so excited to like see the dynamics of all of these characters in this weird blend. Like, I know I have to keep that urban fantasy vibe. Like, that is primarily what it is. It's a little bit of a supernatural procedural, but it's not a mystery. It's not a police procedural, but it kind of has that investigative element in it, like Buffy, Supernatural, or House 13. They have that, but there's that variety because
Mhm.
one week they could be looking for a cursed object. The next week they may be hunting this vampire that's killing people, walking home from church. I don't know. So, like, there's just all of these weird random things that could happen, and each story has its own unique flavor, and it has a little bit of that horror comedy in it, but that's not primarily what I would market it as. And then there's that romantic subplot between my main character and the handyman that's like, and who knows, maybe Dave will turn out to be some kind of paranormal thing himself and he's trying to fly under the radar. I don't know. But right now, Dave is getting very upset and wanting to double, triple, quadruple his rates if he has to come back there again at 2 a.m. to fix a door that's been ripped off the hinges.
Yeah, that sounds fun. And I think that it's helpful to look at what things excite you and inspire you, and because you can enjoy reading something,
Yes.
but as writers we also need that constant fuel of inspiration, because the inspiration is what gets us to show up at the page, and that we have to continuously fuel to get us to continuously move in that direction of finishing that book. And so,
Exactly.
fostering those things that will continually inspire you. It sounds like, oh my God, what was that channel? There was a channel in the early 2000s that had like Charmed, and then it had Supernatural, and then it had
It was the
yes.
WB. Yeah, it's all of that. Yes, because that's what I grew up on, right?
Yeah.
That
It's
was
it's
my
like
thing.
that whole
It is
thing.
that whole universe of that kind of stuff, and kind of that quirkiness that you get from sci-fi channels
Yeah.
shows like Eureka
Yeah.
and all those things. Yeah, it's like that is what I grew up on, and I feel like that is so my weird personality where I'll just like laugh at myself in the middle of the store and be like, "What the hell's wrong with her?" I'm like, "I just saw something funny my character would say." So yeah,
Yeah.
that is like
But like
there.
having those things, cuz like as I wrote this cozy fantasy, I'm like, I love reading cozy fantasy. And I'm like, I'm writing it and I'm editing it and stuff like that, and it's a little bit of a slog. Like like I finished writing it. I'm like, okay, yep, this is everything that I need to do in this book and stuff. But writing my epic, that was just a whole nother experience and stuff. Like, I love the whole world building and the immersion in this whole other world and stuff, and like just things that are just like you're not going to see anything familiar in it. I have another book idea for a science fiction that's basically pretending to be our spirit guides and stuff, and so it's all science fiction, but it's going to be like, oh yeah, humans call this like their spirit guides, but like this is what it really is, like that type of thing. Like it just have all of these fun immersive ideas on things. And that's my big thing is like at its core, it has some sort of magical element. I categorize science as another form of magic. It's just magic you can measure.
I love that.
And so it has some sort of magical element to it. It's an immersive world. Like those are the things that I'm just like, oh my God. And then what if it's this? And what I have another one that's just like, what if like we're harvesting feminine, like feminine energy? Like it's a whole and so because that's what you need. You need those things that are going to be like, oh my God, what if it's
Yeah.
this? And then this can happen and stuff like that, because that's what moves you from that planning phase into the writing phase, because that first draft phase is very scary and it's very heavy because you're taking something that doesn't exist and you're moving it onto something onto the page, and you're having to keep everything straight, and you're having to, like, so it's difficult to cross that threshold, but it's vital to cross that threshold. So if you have something that is going to get you there, then stick with that. Like, don't do romantasy because it's really popular right now. Don't do comedy horror because it's really popular right now, because trends change constantly. And books take a while to write and publish. So by the time your book is on the shelf, there's no guarantee that that trend is still going to be a thing. People might be completely over it by then. You have to write what calls to you. You have to write what you're passionate about, because that's what's going to make it to be completed. And your readers are going to pick up on that too. They're going to pick up on that resonance factor.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to find that balance. And I feel like we also need to be careful that we're not throwing too many things in the pot, and having it get muddy, right? Like we want to have something nice come out. We don't want just kind of like word vomit of it's everything. Because it's got to be
Right.
something, and you can sprinkle in the other things.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I think it's important to realize, like, you don't have to, if there's a romance in it, a little, like, if there's some sort of romantic element that happens in it, you don't have to categorize the romance. Like, it can just exist. You know, if it just happens to be in this historical setting, it doesn't have to be categorized as a historical fiction just because you're in the West, the Wild West, or whatever. Like, it can just be, space cowboys and stuff, and that's fine.
Yes. Oh my God. So there is a book series, Connie B. Truant and Sean Platt, and it's called Unicorn Western. And they made it on a joke, and it ended up becoming super popular because they're like, what would happen? Like, wouldn't it be cool if cowboys rode unicorns? And they're like, ha ha ha. And they're like, we're gonna write that. And they wrote a whole series about it, and it's like hilarious. And you wouldn't think that those two genres would mesh, but it worked, and it was funny. And it just lit them up, and they're like, let's have fun and let's do it, and see what happens. But yeah, like this idea that I kind of like had come in this weekend, it feels like this is the world that my original Cozy Mister character wanted to live in. She's like, this is the tone, this is the world. And it's just kind of like, all right, if this is coming to me now, I'm writing all the ideas down. And then once all the ideas down, then I see, is this the book that like my brain is like feeling good to write? Because the epic is like, it's like a big like thing looming, and it's so complex. And I'm like, all right, if I just need to get words on the page, maybe I start with the lighter thing first. And this,
Yeah.
that bigger project is my longer term passion project, instead of letting that prevent me from even getting writing done and just be like, I'm going to write my book. I'm going to write my book. And then 2 years from now, I'm still haven't started writing the book because it's still too overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. So I think there is a there's something that happens to us whenever we actually get to a certain point in the drafting process. Like it's because we can all sit here and think of all of our book ideas and plan out all of our book ideas, and we can do all the plotting and everything like that. But if we don't actually make it to the page, then those outlines are going to just forever live on our computer. And we're just going to have like these cute little notebook full of ideas and stuff like that. In order to actually bring it into reality, we have to make it to the page. And I think that once you have that threshold that you cross with, like, okay, you've reached 50,000 words now in this story and stuff, whether the story actually ends up on the shelf or not, because there's a lot of authors that write a story and this stays in their drawer until they're like, no, this is what I need to do with the story, and then they finish editing and they reshape the story and they turn it into something. I think Brandon Sanderson did that with Mistborn initially, and so that happens a lot with authors. But what that actually did was it brought that writer through an entire book, through the creation of an entire book. And that helps them from then on out. It helps them then get to the page easier, get from planning process to drafting process easier. And then that can make it easier for them to actually complete the book and stuff. And so it's like going through these evolutions, right? It's just like Pokemon. We're just Pokemon with more, difficulty motions. So, you have to go through your evolution going from, I don't know Pokemon, so I'm not going to give you an example, but you're going from one version of yourself, the planner, or the plotter, or the ideation phase, and into the drafting phase. And if there's something that makes it feel easier, like it's a lower bar, a lower barrier to entry to get into that drafting phase, do that one, get that draft done. And then when you go back to the thing that felt so much more difficult, it's going to just be so much more easy to get to the drafting phase on the hard one, because now you've done it.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like I need to pick a different book to be the one that gets me writing. Because this one is still, it's just hanging me up every time. I'm like, I get to a spot and I'm like,
Mm-hmm. And it's
I
been
write in
pretty
this other realm,
consistent
and
too.
it's been very consistent with it. And I have a couple novellas that I've written, and those just kind of sit. And I do want to revisit one of them later because it was really fun. And I did it in school, and it needs love. But I want to revisit that at another point in time, but not now. And I was like, okay, I have two other short stories completely mapped up, and I was really excited for those. And that's kind of stuff would get me writing. Every time I approach this epic fantasy, I hit a wall. And I was like, I have to be okay with that and not have such a death grip on this book that I have to just constantly put off writing and not get anything done. I need to learn to be okay that this book is a long-term project. It's not going to necessarily be the now project, but it's the one that when I get the inspiration, I will keep adding and adding and adding, and eventually I'll hit that point with it where I'm like, yes, let's go. But I'm not feeling that passion for it. And it's just been constantly the cycle of I hit a point and it just stresses me the hell out and I don't want to write.
Yeah.
So I
And
think
it might be one of those things for you that it's just like those bursts of inspiration come and you just go into the epic until the inspiration dies, and then you go to the other one. And I think it's just like, how can you chisel away until you create
exactly.
a sculpture?
Yep, just that slow progress here or there on that one, where the other kind of more lighter, urban, modern thing is my natural voice. I feel like that book also is my natural voice because whenever I sit down to do stuff, I write weird shit. And I go to sit down and I go to write a scene in my epic and I'm like, man, I can picture it. I have the book pictured, but I go to sit down and to write and I'm just like, ugh. And then I'm like, okay, let me go write this scene with this therapist, having therapy with these squirrels in a park. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, yep, I'm weird. So I need to honor my weirdness. And if that's the writing that comes natural to me, that it feels effortless, that it's just boom, I just spent 30 minutes writing this thing, I'm like, okay, that's where I need to be because that is the zone I need to get my brain into.
Yeah, if it gets you to the page, which this episode turned into genre mashing and into a mini coaching session for Rachel, and that's okay.
But my thing
And
is a
that's okay
mashup
because it
of
was
the
good
genres.
information. It is a whole mashup, and like, you know, so
that is how you bring a
so
mashup
that's
to
perfect.
life
Yeah, yeah.
in practice.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think that is just about our time. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode. If you're interested in the Fantastical Foundations course that I mentioned, they will be linked below, as well as our episode on spicy books. That will also be linked below. And what else did we mention that we're going to link below?
I will put the books we chatted about below.
Okay, and then the books that we said.
And I think that was it. Yeah, we got a couple of our craft books, like How to Write a Romantasy. I don't know.
Yeah. And
And
then
then
7 drafts was
and
the other
7
one.
drafts and Shut Up and Write the Book. Yeah, those are the books. Those are them. Check them out. They're amazing. And speaking of books, if you would like to join us, we have officially started a Storystruck book club, and it is on Fabled, and it is Storystruck Pod, I believe. Is that what it is called?
Yeah. So the platform or our Storystruck Fable account is Storystruck Pod, but the book club. So if you go on Fable, you go to clubs. It's called Story Spirals Book Club, and you'll see our cute little kitty logo right there as well. So if you would like to join the book club, we are doing The Heroine's Journey by Gail. What's her last name?
Carragher, I think. Yeah.
Gail Carragher. We're going to be like getting your input all on the app here. And then we're going to be having our story spiral, and we'll put a little bit of your opinions and your thoughts about the chapters, about the, topics and stuff into our story spiral. And so we would love for you to join us and love for you to go through this adventure of the heroine's journey with us. So that will also be linked below if you want to join.
And we have a whole bunch of Story Spiral books planned for this year to do in the book club, and then to have our fun Story Spiral episodes where we just kind of chat about all of it, go off on tangents, look at everything with the book. And so we're going to do a variety of genres this year. So we're starting off with the craft book, but then we also have do like a lit RPG. We're going to do sci-fi,
science fiction,
we're going to do gothic horror. Yeah. So we're branching out, having fun, getting outside of our comfort zone and reading different types of stories. And we're reading them like a writer and coming back and sharing our thoughts on it. And we are not allowed to DNF the books. So even if we don't like it, we're going to, go through it and have some chats about it. So definitely come find us on Fabled. Join the book club, and even if you're not into this one, you're going to see some other really fun ones coming up.
Oh yeah, we're trying to pick some really fun ones that we know people will enjoy. So that way, you're not just getting something obscure. Although I will say, I think our December read will get a little obscure. I think that one's going to be.
We have a fun winter episode planned. Like we're both like giddy schoolgirls in the background over.
We're doing a book swap for winter. So I'm buying a mystery, a secret book, not a mystery book. It's a secret book for Rachel to read that is winter based. And she is doing the same for me. And so whoever joins the book club gets to basically pick what book they want to read. And we'll see what your thoughts are on these books as well.
Yes. And we're going to get outside of our comfort zone with those too. So it's going to be fun. Yeah. I picked one that she's going to be like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fun times.
So awesome sauce. So without further ado, go look at the comments below and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please like, share, comment, do all the things because your support means everything for our little podcast. If you have an episode suggestion, please email us at storystruckpodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you'd like to hear next. You can also follow us at the links below.